Hello and welcome to the Delirium engine, where we move fast, faster than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Today I'm with my good friend, the Spartan. As per normal, Spartan is our most basic regular, and yeah, we are currently in the process of doing our last episode of I Character. Yeah, it's been 7 episodes, a good run.
Yep.
I think we have an average of like 3 views on the I Character series. People really liked it.
Yeah.
Real positive. But yeah, we're on our last episode. It's let's take a couple seconds, I guess, because I don't know. I haven't quite figured out how we're going to talk about feeling and flaws, which is going to be our topic. I'm not going to put it up yet. We'll talk when we talk about it. But let's look back on I Character and see what we have to say about it. So far, at least. Maybe we'll get a better episode by figuring that out. What do you think? I've mentioned it before off air, but a lot of the problems with the I Character series might have been that we didn't have the right question.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of just trying to figure out what makes a good character. You have to be asking the right question. If you just jump in without really having a question to ask, it's hard to find the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that way, in this way, we're going to have to try to figure out the question first. Maybe that'll be the first thing that we talk about. Okay. So like I said before, we are talking about feeling and flaw. So we'll start by explaining what I mean by the feeling of the character, and flaw obviously is pretty self-explanatory, but what we mean by the feeling, and then maybe we'll see if we can figure out what the question is, that we're going to be trying to ask on this episode, and then see if we can answer the question.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good. So the feeling of a character is, it's kind of hard to describe specifically, but it's kind of the thing that isn't on your character sheet. Your stats don't represent it. It's almost like your character's
personality.
Yeah, there's that. But like, I'd almost call it like the your desktop theme for your character.
Okay.
Like
so the overall
very
image.
similar to backstory, but not really.
Yeah.
Like, because you can have 100 different backstories and still have the same theme. So the feeling of your character, to me, like say you have a character that's like, I want to be a pirate. So you act like a pirate. You say yar, you walk with a limp because you either pretend or you actually have a peg leg. Who cares? Whatever.
Yeah.
All right? That the feeling of your character is someone who wants to be a pirate. Or is a pirate. Or pretending to be a pirate. But like, that's the feel. Right?
Yeah.
You get this feeling to it. Sometimes your character is comical. Sometimes your character is like real dramatic. Sometimes your character is serious. None of these things they don't come in your description. They don't come anywhere. They're nowhere on the character sheet.
Yeah.
Right? You never write down what the feel of your character is. Maybe when you draw the picture. Maybe that's what this part of the character sheet is the picture in the corner. It sets the tone. But even though, not everybody can draw a character. And not everybody writes the feel of their character in their backstory. Right?
True.
Like it's kind of interesting. It does expand. Like the feel changes as time goes on too.
Well,
but
yeah. Things happen to change how your character works.
So I guess saying, just so we can finish up the whole discussing what the feeling is.
Yeah.
The feeling of your character is sort of the emotional state you put yourself in when you're playing your character. I think that would probably be my best response. Like my best answer to the what is feeling.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, because he's like, I want to be a pirate, or I want to be an outgoing person, or something like that. Like you when you start to play that character, you set your state, your emotional state to that setting, and then you go.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then obviously the flaws are things that you take into mind that I don't necessarily mean like, because a lot of systems, thinking things like Palladium, World of Darkness, and GURPS. I think Palladium has flaws. I don't remember. It's been 20 years.
D&D 5th has a flaws system, I think.
Yeah, that's horrible. Anyway, flaws are horrible.
Well,
no, 5th
within
doesn't have
reason.
flaws.
Yeah,
No, it
5th
doesn't.
has a flaw system.
No, it has like flaws in it. They don't give stats, and they don't give you bonuses.
Yeah, no, they don't.
No, okay, yeah. I mean, when I mean flaws, like that give bonuses,
Oh.
or like they give you extra points to spend. So, like, say if it was cast, because I know you know enough about cast to mention is if it was in cast, it'd be like you get a character point every time you take a flaw, and then if you have to act that flaw out.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. So, but what we're talking about is like these are the handicaps that you give yourself in the roleplay sense. So it's like I say your character talks with a stutter. You're not getting stats for it, but you've chosen to have this character talk with a stutter. That's a flaw.
Yeah.
And the reason I lumped it together with feeling is, the two of them together produce that like the flaws are sort of a way to produce the feeling of your character too. Like you add flaws. If your flaw is that you're like a homunculus, like some just giant humongous guy who's real slow or whatever, like that trope, that'll all add into your feeling. Like that's.
Yeah.
It's just flaws are another way that we can sort of
expand the image.
Yeah, and also a way that I can explain what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because you can have a whole bunch of flaws, and then if you act them all out, they create a feeling. If that makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, I think that covers it. I think we have an idea of what feeling is. So I guess the first part of the episode then would have to be asking the question. Okay, so what are we? What is the question we're trying to ask here? You've produced a feeling. What's the best feeling? Does that make sense? Like, are we just going to argue for 2 hours like gender episode? Like, what's the best feeling? Well, it depends on what you prefer.
Exactly.
So that's not a good answer, but it is not a good question either.
No.
So
I wouldn't say that's a good question.
So like, maybe the question is how do you make the best feeling for your character, or how do you get into the feeling for your character? Maybe that's a good question to ask. So I might write that one down. That's a good topic. Well, maybe we'll talk about that one. How to get into character. Because honestly, getting into character, like if you get into character, whether or not your character lives, dies, succeeds, or fails, you get this weird feeling. Like I've only had other players do it. I've done it myself, but I've only had other players do it a couple of times, where they literally are in. Like they are in character. It's all dialed. They feel like they're that person, and the decisions they're making are the decisions of that character.
Yeah.
And it's this weird feeling that you don't get playing a video game or anything like that. It's like
it's a lot more personal.
Yeah, it's a super immersion, and the most successful characters are ones that can get to that state, right? You can't get it by having more dice. You can't get it by twinking out your system. You can only get it by role playing, and that would probably make feeling and flaw. If you can dial that in, if you can make that work, by using all the other pieces of the I character set or whatever set you want to use. But if you bring all that stuff, will bring it together, and if you produce that feeling and you enact it correctly, you get into that feeling and you get into the zone, you'll have the best experience of your life. It'll be unreal.
Yeah.
Like it's like walking in another man's shoes, or whatever.
Yeah.
So how to get into character is a good question. But, how do you make the feeling of your character maybe appropriate for the game that you're playing? No, like, I think people can sort of figure that out.
That kind of comes with the...
Don't play a guy with retard strength in a high drama game. Like, don't play a comic relief character. Like, that's the same thing as, like...
your feelings should reflect the world around you.
Yeah. Or maybe if you're like a comic relief character, you might have to
within reason then.
Yeah, I don't know. Like that's another thing that I don't know if I can answer that. But how maybe the question should be how to select the right sort of flaws and quirks to define your feeling. Like what do you think? You know, you want something, you want to say something, and how actually maybe that's the thing. How do we define your feeling? Like a character's feeling, you can easily say I want to be a pirate, but what does that mean? You know, like do you just want to go around stealing things? There's lots of different ways to be a pirate.
Yeah.
You know, you can do all sorts of things. So maybe defining something more, like a lot of players will be like, I just want to play Naruto. It's like, well, what is that? Like, I can understand there's a feeling to that, but what is Naruto? Maybe that's the question. Maybe that's the question we need to be asking this episode. Is, you know, how to define the feeling of your character? Because, like I said, it doesn't get written down.
True.
Ever. You just have to sort of get into it. It's a headspace.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's where we'll go right now. How to define the feeling. To define feeling. Okay. So I guess
I get the feeling I'm going to have to do a lot of thinking.
Yeah, that's the problem with these iCharacter episodes. They require a lot of sort of introspection. But maybe I can help lead that.
Yeah.
As the host of the radio show that we seem to be playing.
That'd be a good idea.
Okay. Let's see if I can get a direction here.
Okay.
Now, let's say the last character you played that you were very happy with in terms of the in-characterness of your character.
Okay.
Okay? How did you define that character? Like what would you say the feeling of that character was? And if you can't describe it right now, like if you can't describe it very quickly, try to describe her flaws or his flaws.
She's very free-flowing, very open, happy-go-lucky.
Okay.
Let's go with happy-go-lucky.
Sure. Okay, so this is that's the feeling is happy-go-lucky.
Yeah.
I'll say any flaws attached to that.
Limited interaction with the outside world would be basically her biggest flaw.
Okay, so like naivete.
Yeah.
All right. So you're playing the sort of naive outsider.
Yeah.
All right.
Like her whole thing was to explore the world and come back with what she learned of. Because her people were in outcast, not outcast, but in like exile.
Yeah. So what? When you got into character, did you play your character as one who had a sense of wonderment in the world around them, or did you play them as a character? Like, how did you play the character?
A healthy dose of curiosity, I'd say.
Okay.
And I kind of got to think about it. She's very curious about how things work now.
Are you still playing the character? Is that?
Unfortunately, the game has seemed to have stalled out and may or may not be coming back.
Oh.
It's been a few weeks.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But yeah, she didn't really know much in terms of technology, and what she did know never really came up. But I don't know. It's hard to say, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just to put some sort of, comparison, I guess.
Sure.
I played a character. Let's see. Let's go with Hrult, which is a character I played. He was a barbarian. He's supposed to be a character that kind of inserts themselves into whatever game that's being run,
Okay.
as long as it's a fantasy game, because he is the god of grand battles and high adventure. And when a party needs a guy, sometimes he'll just show up, and he'll be at just the right level of skill for everybody to just succeed by the skin of their teeth. Like, he'll always help just enough that they'll always kind of succeed.
Yeah.
Or they'll fail miserably, because that's part of the journey too. But So the idea is, like, mechanically speaking, like, this character comes in and he's the same level as everybody else with the same roughly the same kind of gear, and he's not at a super disadvantage, but he's not at a major advantage, and he doesn't use his god magic for anything. Usually he'll just be like a barbarian or a fighter, and he'll just play the game and talk about how he's ruled and make everyone second guess whether he's actually a god or not, because he never does anything godly.
Yeah,
he's just a fairly charismatic dude. So, the feeling of this character is one of, like, bombastic sagacity, I guess would be the words I would use. Like, this is a guy who goes out, he has a voice, like, and that might be something we should talk about, is, like, the voices of characters.
Okay.
Like, he projects, like, I am Hrud. I come out, and when I want to come out, I come out quick and fast, and I give you advice all the time, and whether you take it or not, that is up to you, and you can get this feeling of that character right away, and I actually literally insert myself into this character, and he's, I derive it from a bit like my personal bombastic nature, so it's not entirely alien to me, but this character's feel is one of, like, a positive feel. It's an outgoing feel, and you put yourself up into this headspace that sort of generates a good attitude throughout the party. Like, even when a character is being bad, he's not like, you are terrible. Like, sometimes he'll say that, but it's more like, it's more like, I wouldn't do that, or perhaps you are doing something wrong. It's like, you may wish to go away from this path that you have taken. So, like, stuff like that, where it's like he's giving you, like, advice, and whether you take the advice or not is not something he really cares about, but he does care that you, who are obviously his chosen, because he's jumped there, down and there with you.
Yeah.
He cares that you have a good game, a good story.
Enjoy the adventure.
Yeah. Hopefully you're full of grand battles and high adventure.
Okay.
And so, if I had to, like, define, so, like, his flaws and stuff is, like, he'll often he has to constantly balance the grand battles and the high adventure, because high adventure is not the same as a grand battle. High adventure is like wonderment, and this is like Baron Munchausen level stuff, where it's like, I ride the cannonball to the moon, that kind of things, like things that don't make sense, but they happen anyway, right?
Yeah.
And grand battles are obviously grand battles. Let's roll initiative. Let's all fight and kill the dragon. And so, it's something that is always has to be, like, as a flaw. Like, I would call it a flaw, because he's always like, the easy path is grand battles. It's just be a shithead.
Yeah.
Right? But high adventure is equally or more important sometimes. And that's the kind of thing where you tell the Kraken a joke and he laughs, and then as a result, you've basically made friends with a Kraken and have changed the world.
And he doesn't eat your boat.
Yeah, he doesn't eat your boat, and in fact makes it so that other boats who pass through, if they tell him a good joke, he'll let them pass.
Oh, there you go.
But you've changed the world that way, but there was no battle.
No.
You wouldn't even call that epic, but it was epic, because you told a Kraken a joke and made it laugh. Like, that's pretty insane, and it's that kind of, like, it's a character that you slot yourself into. I am someone who does all of these things. Like, these are the things that I am, and that you can see how that might be extremely different from the shadowy loner.
Yeah.
Who's like a negative kind of character. The feel is one of, like, not bombastic. It's like, I don't care. You just change it. If you live or die means nothing to me. Stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And
I'd say that's closer to the character I had before, the happy-go-lucky one.
Yeah. And and often it's not easy. Like, this is probably, this part, like, feeling and flaw is something I don't have down. I don't think I struggle with it every time. Yeah. And it's something I always have to explore too, right? Like sometimes when you start a character, they're literally just stats on a page with maybe a goofy voice, and then it takes 2 or 3 sessions before you can finally get your stride and figure out the feeling of your character. Like, yeah, you can say things like "I'm a pirate," but when the game's presented you with once you've stepped into the game, you know, you might not even be role playing that pirate. You might be role playing some other character, some weird thing that you didn't even define.
Yeah.
And then you just roll with it or stick with it, or maybe you have to change it. Right, like, I think probably one of my more challenging characters is like Agora, because she's like a barbarian and she's like a very Bryant style character. I want to build a base and I want a base and I want an army and I want to go out and conquer everything or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And she is a character that has those motivations, but she's a lady and she's also kind of girly. But these are things that I always forget.
Yeah.
Like in the feel, I always forget that. And I last session I made a point of getting my nails done rather than saving the party.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I was no, they're fine. They're fine. I'm with the queen right now and we are getting our nails done. All right.
Oh, well, you're with
very
the queen.
Important. Well, yeah. Well, I wanted to go hang with the queen. I'm her duchess. She's the queen. We don't get to hang out enough.
Well, there you go.
So we had a couple minutes to we were trying to set a trap for a wizard or some nonsense. Actually, it was a shapeshifter who was like mimicking the king, right?
Oh.
And so we set a trap, and we're like, well, we got to hang around for a couple hours. And we're I'm gonna go hang out with the queen, and then of course, right in the middle of my manicure, a bunch of stupid stuff happens, and I'm going to jump onto my chair for them. I'm like, no, you know what, let the boys handle this. All right, they can deal with it. I've done enough. All right? And so, but by going through that character, it made the whole session excellent, because then the characters couldn't rely on the Swiss Army knife druid to come out and save the day. And then when they finally solved the problem, they got to a point where they couldn't. My manicure and my pedicure, because I got a pedicure too,
of course,
it had been finished. And I had walked down to the dungeon, and literally, the only thing I did all session, other than say, "Okay, guys, do some in-character talking to people," was get my nails done, come down to the dungeon where there was now some confusion because doppelgangers make confusion happen. Cast Moonbeam on the two of them, which does a bunch of damage. So it's cast Moonbeam on the king, cast Moonbeam on the wizard. Okay, I'm good. See you later. Bye. And I literally just turn around and walk away. I don't even think I cast Moonbeam on the wizard until someone mentioned it. I'm like, fine, and I just moved it over 30 feet because you can do that, and then left. Went back to the, gossip and eat cakes with the queen.
Jeez.
But that was all I did. I literally my entire session was that. But that was, to me, that was a memorable session, even in terms of bringing out that character.
Yeah.
Because, previous sessions where I just did the one thing, where I was I made the tactical decisions and I did all these things and we ran with armies and we were doing all this stuff. I didn't feel like we explored the feel of that character. Literally, we were playing a video game and I'm just making choices. And true enough, part of a character is she's supposed to be a war-centric character, so going to war and doing things is important.
Yeah.
And just getting your nails done wouldn't make you a war-centric character.
No.
But the juggling between the two, right?
Yeah.
This is where, to me, the feel of that character is challenging. And you, because what's the point of playing a lady if you're not going to play a lady? If you're just going to play a dude with boobies. That's stupid. Just play a dude. Yeah.
No, that's fair.
So, yeah, there was... anyway, but, what I'm sort of getting at here is those two types of characters are very different. The shadowy loner is very different. They're all kind of different, and by you giving your example and then these examples, you can kind of see, maybe we can sort of see how we produce these feelings, these character feelings, right? So, say I've described them as positive and negative. Maybe that's a thing that's important. This might, the feel of your character might actually be an axis, kind of like alignment. It's are you a positive character? Maybe alignment is trying to point to your feels, but it's just doing a shit job. It could be that too. I'm a chaotic guy. It's
can-
like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, I can see that.
That actually, now that we're sort of saying it, I think that that's maybe true. I think the alignment system is just a way to try to produce the feel of your character, and maybe that's obvious to most people, and that we're just sort of, I'm not going to say stumbling onto it, because I think we said it last episode more or less, but
Yeah.
but maybe we didn't push the idea far enough. Like maybe alignment should really just be like 20 axes, you know. but that's absurd.
Well, once you start getting up there, it starts getting kind of difficult to manhandle.
Yeah, but it might be like positive and negative.
Well, yeah.
So like a positive character might be outgoing. That's like a zealous character, but not really. Like positive zealous might be something more important than negative zealous. Like a negative zealous character would be one that goes out of his way to make your life miserable. Like
Yeah.
who takes great efforts to make people miserable, or to like self-aggrandize.
Yeah.
You know? But a positive zealous character might be one that goes out of his way to help people, or to help himself become better. You know?
Yeah, that makes sense. I can
Like
see that.
so that might be part of this like the feeling thing, where it's like adding more axes, that like invisible axes to the alignment system. It's like, I'm a positive character. We've already got good, but maybe male and female might actually be an axis. When you're playing that character, that might actually be part of it. That might be another, like, I'm playing a female character, like someone who's very effeminate, and versus a person who's very masculine. Like, whether or not your gender, the F or M on your sheet or whatever,
Yeah.
on your sheet says, you might be an effeminate male, and you could be you can see these tickers going by, like all these things, and that might help create that feel. And then maybe there's like a small description at the end of what sort of wraps that around. Something like I'm a pirate, or I'm a ninja, but that could also be a backstory.
Yeah. It's hard to define feeling.
Maybe now that I'm actually thinking it, like maybe the feeling and flaws section, like maybe we should focus more on the flaws, but the whole feeling of the character is really just the final presentation.
Yeah.
Which is probably why this is the last episode.
Makes sense. The final image of your character.
Yeah, like, let's take all of these things together. And maybe that's the question. How do we take all of the other things together and produce something that feels right? How do you get into character? How do you get into the character that you've created using all of these other texts on the box? Maybe that's actually the real question that we're trying to ask here.
Maybe.
So, well, what do you think? Do you think, say we get a name. So, like, just we'll go through the I character series, right? Like,
okay.
The name thing. A successful name will help the name itself helps produce the feel of your character. I think we even said that. We said that in the episode.
Yeah.
A good, solid name that, like, properly, sounds right for the kind of character you're playing. If you're playing Wizzlewitz McManfield, let's hope that he is a character, like, just having that name in your like character box sort of sets a precedent for how you are. Wizzlewitz Manfield, this guy's got like a wondery kind of name to it.
Yeah, it's kind of
has a sort of
sorcery.
Yeah, maybe. Or at the very least, maybe someone who's a little scattered. Like,
yeah, I could see
like
that.
The name
too.
Wizzlewitz, like that sounds like the kind of name of someone who, has attention deficit disorder or something. Like, whatever. And so you got the gender. Are you effeminate? Are you masculine? Are you actually a man? Are you actually a woman? Whatever. Your backstory. Does your backstory? Well, your backstory should sort of, like we said before. I think this was the backstory is kind of the.
Your connection to the world.
Your connection to how to. Yeah, so that backstory produces sort of how you feel about the world you're standing in.
Yeah.
Right? So, your name has produced a feeling of its own just by dint of the name you've chosen. Your gender should be giving you extra feeling, so you should be acting more like a man or a woman or someone who's, bucking the trend in those genders.
True.
Worst case scenario, you actively play a blob, and whatever. Then I guess you're a blob. Then your gender is agender, right?
Yeah.
And your backstory will produce the feeling that you have towards the world that you live in, and your weapon of choice will define the way you solve these problems that you're having. So it adds a sort of it adds the action feel to your character, like the feeling, it'll add the kind of direction your character will generally take in most actions, like the way the river of your character flows.
Yeah.
Your primary motivation is that's the feeling. You're adding the primary motivation is adding your
The drive.
the goal to your character, but it's adding
The feeling
of that drive. If I get it, I really just want to pick I want to pick up an apple at the apple cart on the corner.
Yeah.
That produces a feeling of a character that just wants to do something simple and can't. Or, because obviously they would have done this already. Why are they playing the game?
Yeah.
Right? So, the feeling of... So your primary motivation sort of determines how far is your reach, or how foiled you are in the basic shit that you want to do, or even the slightly imbasic shit that you want to do. I just, I want to become a knight. It's like, well, you're part of a noble family. Why aren't you a knight?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, this, that, and the other reason. Or maybe your reason is a whole bunch of flaws that you've set up. I just don't work very hard. I don't do very much. I'd rather just wander around and be a maniac. Whatever, right? And then, your alignment determines your sort of how... It determines the sort of your feeling towards,
How you go about
selfishness versus your altruism.
Yeah.
How energetic you are. I would add probably positive and negativity. Are you basically a positive centric character? Negative centric, a negative character. Maybe that's just good and evil. Positive and negative, but it might not be.
I wouldn't say it's just good and evil. Because you could have a negative evil character.
Well, your alignment is your various axes that will determine your stance on the opposites.
Yeah.
Right? Good, evil. On the black and white things, where you are in the spectrum of gray, sort of. And most people, have the three settings, but I'm sure there's spectrums you can work with if you really wanted to. And then. Once you've taken all of these into account, and we've sort of, like I said, we just went through them, that's producing all of the things, and then all you have to do is add the quirks to your character, the flaws and the quirks, which aren't listed here, and things like, I like eating tomatoes, I will literally drop everything if there's a spider in the room. I will, and these things usually don't have stats because you can't put numbers to them, and you don't know how much they'll come up. I have a terrible fear of mallets. I really like mallets, like fade to black like mallets. Whatever. These are all things that your character might. Your character should. You add to your character just for the kicks, and. The more of those that you add, like these flaws and these little quirks, which I'll for now I'll just call it feeling, the feel of your character.
Yeah.
Do you like cooking? Yeah. Did you take skills in it? Not really, because you're not particularly good at it. You just enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
Or maybe you will take cooking skills later. Who knows? Or maybe you like if you're playing cast, maybe you took 1 point of freaking homemaker. And then just that covers all of the quirks that you have. I like to sew, I like to keep house, I like to clean, sometimes I make dinner, I don't do, I'm not a master of it, I don't read books on it, but whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, even if you have the ability to spend a little bit of your character's, precious points that you're going to be using for stuff to define some of your feeling, your ancillary features of your character,
Yeah, I try to do that with my characters.
Yeah.
I'll usually, if I'm playing like D&D or something, like if I choose my profession, which I usually do, I'll usually make it something simple.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't go around crafting like high-end jewelry or whatever.
Yeah.
Like usually it's like, for my last character, she had the ability to basically summon fire whenever she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be the clan's cook. Like, I trained under the cook then. Because I can literally just be like, boom, fire. I can control its temperature range, get everything perfect, right?
Yeah.
And the other character before that was an alchemist. I threw so many points into alchemist. It was ridiculous. Like, I was rolling 40s for alchemy, which is pretty up there in Pathfinder anyway.
Yeah, 40 in alchemy is nuts.
Yeah.
That's people who are not trained in, like, I had a character, we played an epic game, and this was like a PvP epic game. The most broken character I ever made had a stealth of 60.
Wow.
So, like, that's like master thieves who critically succeed at their, or master whatever, skilly people that critically succeed at like detect or whatever, spot, still can't find you.
Yeah.
So what his dirty trick was basically he would shoot you with a bow and then use his like 5-foot move to hide or whatever, and the bow insta killed you because it was like a solar bow. It was stupid. It was dumb. He was the most broken character I'd ever made, but he was probably one of the coolest because his feels were that he was the living embodiment of democracy. We lived in a hive mind, and he didn't have a soul. So what he had to do was he borrowed this hive mind thing in the setting.
Okay.
Like, as a result, we played many epic evils, and as a result, in this particular one, there was a hive mind. And his purpose was to try to repopulate the elven race. And I don't mean go around banging people, because he didn't understand what that meant. But he knew that if you brought male elves and female elves together, babies happened. And so and he knew if you had wives, babies happened. So he would collect elven wives.
Okay.
And bring them back to his mansion where his sister, I guess, would explain the situation to the elf people that he's brought back, and basically be like, yeah, you just, you can bring your whatever, like if you've now been kidnapped,
yeah,
you can't really leave.
No,
none of us really can, right? But just all you really got to do is make elf babies. And yes, you can bring whatever husband that you have, but you have to devote at least one of your baby times to an elf baby. Like that's it. That's the plan. Like, but you're free to stay here. Like, we're trying to rebuild the elven race here, and I'm sorry, but we can't deal with him. He's nuts. and so the feeling of this character was one of, what does the world want right now? That's what I want.
Oh.
I go to this region. Oh, this region is crying out for a savior. Oh, so am I.
Okay.
Maybe I'll be that savior. Yeah, I'll do that. They want this guy dead because he's a tyrant. Oh, he's dead now.
Good job.
I'll do that. And then it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before the game began, we'd write a bunch of fictional writing, and so I would running under the assumption that this is sort of how his modus operandi was. This is how he got to 20 levels, was he just kept doing adventures, and these are the things that the people would cry out for.
And
right?
he'd go and do it.
And yeah, stuff would happen.
Okay.
And as a result, he was like a persona non grata in every kingdom. There were wanted posters for him, but they weren't wanted posters. They were do not approach posters. Don't talk to him. Don't go near him. Any nation who basically, anybody from another nation who violates these crimes, which is interacting with Bedlamite Worm, which was his name.
Okay.
Interacting with him, that is an act of war against our country, and we will go to war with you, because if this guy goes off, we will all lose. Like that this is other players were baffled. Like, why? How are you saying this? Like, how are you setting up this character to be this way? Because you can sort of set your own backstory, and everybody usually has an empire, and they build a little city, and they're the ruler of the city. It's like, I don't have one. Like, I do, but I don't tell anybody about it. No, I'm the wandering guy who roves the land, and all the kings in all the lands don't want anything to do with me. And it pissed a lot of people off, but I thought it was an excellent feel of the character, and the character was like a giant enigma. And it's because he had no real personality.
That's
because he had no soul. Yeah.
Well,
he didn't. That was part of his backstory. He
Yeah.
didn't have a soul. He was supposedly made to try to repopulate the elven race, and it didn't work out, and he ended up being this crazy roaming guy, and the wizard who did it, his daughter, is the one that's there.
Okay.
That was his first wife. You're my wife now. It's like, no, we can't do that. Yep. Okay, we're now married. Okay, whatever that means. Fine. And then he went out immediately to go get another one.
Oh.
Because, yeah. So in that game, I had a whole bunch of elven wives.
Oh, lucky you.
Yep. Yeah, it was nuts. But anyway, yeah, like ridiculous character, but even it had like this feel to it, and the feel was basically empty your mind and just listen. You know, listen to what everybody else is doing. Ask questions. Ask questions of the GM out of character, like, you know, or sort of like inquisitively. The character doesn't talk to people usually, or if it does, it's like, you know, has a really weird expression. It's just like, okay, you know, it doesn't, because it doesn't have a personality. The only personality it has is the personality of everybody around. So if he comes to a city where everyone's jovial and lighthearted, he'll be jovial and lighthearted. But if everybody wants, you know, a new well to be dug, he might grab a shovel.
Oh. Okay.
Like that, and the idea is people hadn't figured that out yet. Like, I didn't explain that to everybody. They just knew that he was terrifying beyond belief. Right? So, yeah.
No, that's interesting. That I can already picture kind of that in my head just by what you explained.
I find actually another good thing to sort of get yourself into character. In addition to having like all of these quirks and stuff, I often grab a theme song.
Yeah.
Like theme songs. Theme songs to me, if you can find music to go along with your character, it is a good way to, when you're not playing the game, sort of practice putting yourself into that mood. Because being in character is like a mood.
Yeah.
Right? You want to be a brooding character, you have to get into a brooding mood. Like, you want to be a bombastic, happy, energetic character, you have to get into that mood. And you should be able to slip in and out of it if you're doing it. If you're very good at it, you should be able to slip in and out. Like it's like, I want to be this character. Okay, I am now this character. And then you're back to who you are again, like in an instant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for example, you know, just because I talked about Bedlamite Worm for a long time, like his theme song that I used, like the de facto song that I would get in the mood was Madness by the band Skazi. Which is actually a pretty cool song. If anybody wants to hear it, it's pretty good.
Okay.
Like,
I don't think I've ever heard it before, but
yeah, probably not.
Shooty
might have played it in his room. Sometimes he plays things from my old playlists because he has it on his computer somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I might have heard it. I don't know.
But like, you wouldn't know it because it's not like you've been like, what is this? Like it's a weird song. It's kind of like a, I don't even know how to explain it. It was a weird song, but I liked it.
Fair enough.
But yeah. Well, what about you? What do you do sometimes to get it? Like when you want to get into character, how do you do that, or how do you sort of put yourself into your character state?
Well,
maybe when you're not playing or whatever. How do you practice to get into character, or do you even do that?
I don't really practice. It's hard for me to explain how I would get into character because I've never really, from what I can remember, I've never really played a character further than like 4 to 5 sessions.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's gotta change.
Usually most games die out before we really get anywhere.
Well, that's got to change. Problem with being an adult.
Yeah. It sucks. I really wish it would last longer because it feels like as soon as I'm starting to get into the character, it stops.
Yeah.
And then I have to move on to something else.
Yeah.
But for me, generally it's just deciding how, like, I'll figure out in the first, like, session or two how I want to run the game, how I want to play the character.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's, like, usually when I'm at work, I do a lot of thinking, because my work is very physically intensive, but it's not very mentally intensive, so I can basically brain dead zombie my way through it.
Yeah.
And I'll spend my time thinking about, like, how would I do this, how would I do that, if something like this popped up, how would I interact with things, or, like, I'll think about the character throughout the day, and it kind of gives me an idea of how I would a better feeling for the character and how I would play it in the session. And then the session comes up and I play the character. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, I do something similar. When I'm GMing, I get into the headspace of my NPCs, right? Like the ones that matter.
Yeah.
So like the game that I ran that was the most successful was the game with the Malfarian, the Dark Sun worshippers, which are the Dark Sun is the god of rot in this campaign setting that I run. But each of those characters, like I have whole soundtracks. I could put together like a mixtape for each of these characters and what these characters sort of get into. And as a result, like I listen to the music, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that GM should think about doing, is when they have characters that are really important, like villains or whatever, keep finding music, even if the music is not something that would generally be to your tastes. Try to find music that character, that represents that character. Like with Blease, which was like this really positive, sort of happy cult leader, but like she was completely vapid. You know, I listened to like Nikki Fortuna or whatever her name is. Like I can't remember the artist, but it was like poppy, girly songs.
Okay.
And like Queen of the Rhythm was like her theme song, because I got really attached to the idea as like you know, I'm the queen of the rhythm and you will be my slave.
Okay.
And so like I listened to that song, but like as a result of me listening, like it produced other quirks for the characters. Like, oh no, this character has this idea now, or this character had these motivations, or you know, you build upon this NPC. No longer is it just like I'm super cool, weeaboo, awesome character. There's a picture I found on, I don't know, Dan Burrow or something.
Yeah.
Now it's that picture, but like I have this theme song, and this theme song sort of led me to this idea, and the idea is like maybe his sword is actually his father's sword or something. Like I'm just wrapping things up off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, no.
But the father's sword can talk to him, and maybe it actually doesn't talk to him, so he's actually just talking to like an inanimate object because he's a nutter. Like, but like you end up like, the songs will lead you into these ideas.
Yeah.
Like I remember one of the other like the Dark Sun priests, Divanom. He was called Divanom, the Library of Plague, and that was and he was morbidly obese.
Okay.
Like morbidly obese. His picture was actually on. Actually, I think all of their pictures were on the Delirium engine in the background at some point. Every single one of them, because I had like just random pictures in the background when the topics finally came up.
Oh.
In the rules for GMs.
Okay.
I think all of the Dark Sun priests were in there, except maybe Peos, which is like the time wizard, who's just a Zelor. Just look up Zelor, Xelor, and you'll know exactly what he looks like.
Okay.
Because he was just a ripoff of that, and he was probably the least good character, just because he never got used that much, except for on the very last session. He was like the last boss. But the other ones, you know, this Library of Plague character, the feeling for him, for this NPC, was like he was supposed to be a somewhat undefeatable entity. Like he's an undefeatable evil because he had a whole bunch of rot demons, which are like undead demons.
Yeah.
That he's basically possessed himself with. He's got like 100 of them, and the scenario that he's supposed to come into effect is that he writes a letter to the party saying, "Hey, I know that your family is in this town. You may want to go there and extract them because it's going to end, and I'm going to be there."
Oh, geez.
And And so the families are, so the PCs are like, oh my god, I gotta save my family, because one of them had a family in this town, and that was like one of his big things, was he had like a sister, and all this other stuff. So they had to get in, break into the town, like find a way into the town in a very short period of time, which they ended up finding like a portal.
Okay.
Like one of the thieves guilds in the city they were in had a portal, and there was another thieves guild in that city because it's a major like dwarven city.
Yeah.
They had another portal, and they aligned the portals, and they got in, right?
Okay.
And there was a, I guess a paladin had showed up, just as they were finishing up, saying, "I'm coming with you guys," and they're like, "Who the hell are you?" It's like, yeah, I looked into, like, I foresaw with a portent that we would have to go there, and I got to go deal with this guy.
Okay.
So they're like, okay. So the scenario was as follows: like this guy who's basically gonna Pokeball demons all through the town.
Yeah.
Right. And these demons are no slouch. Like raw demons are terrible.
Most
like
demons are
you
pretty
don't win
terrible.
against raw demons even if you've killed them, because usually you're diseased by the end. Like they're gross. But the PCs are going in, and they don't actually fight him. This paladin did, and
Okay.
so they're going through the streets fighting whatever random zombies and shit that is a result of this
Pokemoning raw demons.
Yeah,
everywhere.
this giant Pokemon rod priest.
Okay.
Oh, this super fat guy, and in the background, the two of them are fighting. Like lightning bolts are flying, stuff's going on, and I'm describing like this madness that's going on in the background of
Yeah.
these two forces of nature going at it. And so the party is like they extract his family. Like Mandor was the name of the dwarf, right? That who wanted to get his family out. They extract most of his family. I think some of them were really stubborn and didn't leave, but they get him out and they go. But they never fight this guy, so he doesn't really have much of a weight of a personality. But as the game progressed and the character didn't die, I elaborated on it, and the theme music actually like produced these concepts in my head. Like he's actually a writer. He likes to write comedies.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah. Like he likes to write like plays, and he unfortunately, in Malfair, the land that he grew up, he was cast as a rot priest, like a library of plague, like one of these guys who Pokeballs, they take rot demons, which are a byproduct of powerful magic,
Yeah.
and stuff them into him, and so as a result, he gets disgusting and obese, and gets every disease under the sun. He becomes this.
Yeah, the
So
library of play.
Yeah, he doesn't get to write a comedy. So this is what he always wanted, was to write a comedy, and Malfair is not a very comical place. So,
No.
but so that got added to it, and then as a result, like his personality came into play. And then when I finally sort of drew a picture of him, like I gave him like horn-rimmed spectacles because he's like an academic and he likes to read, and so this tangent that I just went on sort of leads to the idea that listen to music, guys. Sometimes it will help you produce more interesting NPCs and more interesting players, like characters. Before the game starts, or even during the game, you start. You can discover things or discover ideas that you like about your newly created or even your older characters that you want to kind of explore into. Mm-hmm. So like, say like take a character like I'm playing Joe Average. It's like, well, suddenly I'm listening to a song that I like about Joe Average, or like whatever, some Joe Average song, and there's like some guitar plucks, and it brings to mind the idea that he likes to play the guitar.
Yeah.
So suddenly Joe Average is now a guitar player, guitar playing Joe Average, right? And so yeah, I don't know. That's just me saying that more is better, basically. Like good things are good. I don't know. It's a good idea to have.
I think so.
Now that I've finished soliloquying here, is there anything you want to add? Like, is there any way that you sometimes... is there anything that you do to add to sort of come up with concepts that work with your character? Or add new things to your character? I know you've only ever really said you've played games that are like 4 sessions long, but
yeah,
like I said, sometimes, when I listen to music and stuff, like I'll just come up with this stuff.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning how you listen to music to do that before. And I did I did actually find a song that I kind of liked for Valere,
Okay.
but that was after the game ended.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about it, one of the more recent things that I've kind of run off of, I've added to a character, was something that happened during the game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently playing a Shadowrun game, but it's play by post, so it's kind of taking forever because people don't remember to post.
Yeah.
But at one point we're talking to this person, and I do a perception check around the area, and we're in like this underground parking lot, and the GM says like, yeah, there's nobody here, there's like the gate guard on the other side, and it's just cars. But he also pointed out that there's a teddy bear that seems to be like abandoned sitting over there. And yeah, I know, it's like, okay, that's probably something, because he wouldn't really have mentioned it otherwise.
Yeah.
But in that moment, it was kind of like, how would I react to that, right? And how does my hard-ass sniper react to that? And I decided that my character in the Shadowrun universe really likes stuffed animals.
Well, there you go. See?
So they go over and pick it up and like boop it on the nose, and then everybody else is like, "Oh yeah, he's fucking, giving me a hard time for it." But I'm like, whatever. Like, maybe I really like stuffed animals. Boop, boop.
Yeah.
And then she like shuffled over and gave it to the security guard. Turns out that stuffed animal was a android from our Decker.
Oh, okay.
Like, nobody suspects the teddy bear was the line. I'm like, yeah, no, that's
Except
pretty
everybody friggin' did. But okay, like, that's a perfect example right there of what we're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
that's like a little character quirk that you've added, like, just on the fly, and suddenly, like, your character has been enriched.
Yeah.
Massively. Like, I'm a super sniper. Who cares? I'm a super sniper who likes teddy bears. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like that. Like even one little thing adding to your character is. It's almost like
It makes
geographical
it more real.
increases in personality.
Yeah.
Characters that don't have these little bits and pieces attached to them are dead characters. They feel dead. They don't play like anything. They just play like guys who roll dice to do damage.
Yeah, they're
right?
very bland.
And like even your story, it's like, oh, we're doing a thing, and I got my sniper rifle, and it's like, and then I saw a teddy bear, and I decided that I like teddy bears, and I booped its nose. You just go. Suddenly, this character became a way more interesting character. Just instantly.
Yeah.
And you can see it with all sorts of stuff, like even like just the characters we listed off too, right? Like it's like the Bedlamite Worm character is literally a blank slate, right? But like if I were to give that blank slate a quirk, like I like collecting elven wives. It's like
That's
and then like add to the quirk. It's like but I don't know what to do with them.
yeah.
Like that suddenly is to me is a more interesting character. Like you now have this idea that like this is a child, like an omnipotent child running around and just absorbing the world around him.
Yeah.
But like not keeping it in one ear out the other one, just like a kid.
Okay. Yeah. Then.
Like boom.
Yeah.
Suddenly that's interesting.
Much more interesting.
Let me think of a character that somebody else has played that I.
Well, harking back to my fire cooking character, the nature one that didn't know anything about technology.
Sure.
Right? Two of our characters in the party used guns,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to think about like how would my character react to that, right? Well, I decided that she didn't like thunder because thunder's scary to some people.
Yeah.
And so these guys are running around with, from all she can tell, are sticks that shoot thunder. they bang like thunder. So
Yeah.
every time somebody would fire a gun near her,
Yeah.
she'd flinch.
Yeah. That,
Like,
being all like, oh, like if your character was like just like, oh yeah, I'm from the wild and I've never seen these things before, and just like this happened, it's like that's interesting,
yeah,
I like or dislike this.
yeah. Like,
it wouldn't
this
be
is-
interesting, but like actually feeling, having completely misunderstood it. Like it doesn't really change anything.
No.
But like now you could start talking about this scenario, be like, I love your thunder sticks. I wish we had some at home. They would scare the bears away. Things like that. Whatever. But you talk about these things, even just talking about the things that are described by the GM or by other players in a completely whacked out way, like an alternate perceptive way.
Mm-hmm.
Super interesting. I think the sort of take-home message from this too is like, the flaws and feels that you add to your character should be like out of the ordinary, just a little bit.
Yeah.
If you're a worshiper of the fish god, one of your flaws shouldn't be you're just too damn devoted to the fish god. Or like you really like doing your job being a devotee of the fish god.
Yeah.
It doesn't add anything, so it kind of has to be on a left field. Like
Yeah, a little bit.
These quirks and flaws have to be from somewhere else to really add things successfully, and the actual like feeling like I'm a devotee of the fish god, right? That alone can sort of add a feel to the character, but once you've added that, I almost like a third dimension, it would work out.
Yeah.
Like it would be superior compared to like, oh, I like, or even like a quirk about the thing that you would be expected to do as a devotee of the fish god. It's like, I make sacrifices to the fish god. I really like sacrificing mackerel. And it's like, well, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Sure. But not really,
No.
because you're already expected to make sacrifices of some sort, and presumably if you're able to sacrifice mackerel, I'm guessing the fish god is into it. Now, if you said the fish god doesn't like fish sacrifices, but you do it anyway, now that's way different. Like, that's way more interesting. And suddenly this is now kind of an interesting character, because now you have you butt heads with the fish god that you love so much.
Yeah.
You're just like, no, fish god, I'm giving you more mackerel. It's like, stop sacrificing fish.
I don't want them.
I don't want
Take
you
them
to
back.
sacrifice mackerel. Stop it. That can of sardines you sacrificed the other day is not something I was really into. Like, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Unfortunately, there's no Don John today.
No Don John?
No.
Oh.
I don't know. I didn't really tell him what this week's episode was, and our schedule was kind of all wonky in the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
So I think, what did we do the last episode on Thursday or something weird like that?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, so it's been a little bit out there. So do you have any closing comments on feels? Like, we had a bit of a discussion. I know we didn't really talk about... Well, we did talk about the feeling. We talked about voice. Having a fun voice is also really good.
Yeah.
It's a good way to ground yourself.
It can also work against you, though.
And then, yeah,
I've found.
Sometimes, if your voice is really annoying and shitty,
Well,
or you just don't like using the voice.
I was fine using the voice. Like, again.
Oh, you have an example?
I have an example.
Okay, well, please elaborate.
Again, we're going back to the nature character. She was a Strix, and Strix don't start the game using common.
Oh, okay.
You have to add it as a learned language. I had a high enough intelligence score. Like, my character was reasonably intelligent.
Yeah.
But common was her third language.
Okay.
And she'd only ever learn it as soon as she started adventuring.
Yeah.
Right? And it would take time to get better at it. So
that is a quirk.
that is a quirk. And she talked like you would expect a 4-year-old to talk, like not really knowing all of the words.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time she didn't understand big words because she hardly ever heard them.
Yeah.
So, and from what I found, that made my character seem really stupid.
Yeah.
Because I would cut out like 2 and a...
That's good.
Like, but she wasn't. She was actually pretty smart. She just didn't know anything because nobody ever told her anything.
Yeah.
And it kind of worked against her for that. Because nobody ever expected anything out of her.
Yeah,
because they treated her like a kid.
But that's great though. Like that's a flaw that all the other characters fell for.
Yeah.
Like that's a super successful character. That's one of the ones that's like if you remember the TV show The Tick, there was
That's before my time.
It's super good. It was super good. There was a character called Sewer Urchin.
Okay.
Okay, and this character is hanging around. The Tick is like an unstoppable, like, you know, just Chad dude, but he's dumb as a brick. And his sidekick is Arthur, who's like a guy, like literally a banker in a moth suit. All right, like a moth suit that like can fly if he flaps his arms.
Okay.
Right? That's the dynamic. An indestructible super guy, and this like banker in a moth suit or accountant in a moth suit. You know, and they fight crime. And there's a whole bunch of other superheroes in this setting, and one of them is like there's like this sort of Batman character called the Flater Mouse, and there's like there's this sewer urchin character called Sewer Urchin, and he's like kind of like a blah, blah, blah kind of character. I can't really. The feel of this character is one of like, you know, he's like a good-hearted guy, but you don't see him as particularly competent in anything.
Okay.
You know, I think he can make like stink clouds or something sometimes, or something like that, or he might have like a poison sting that he can't really do anything with against, you know, a giant chair or whatever.
Okay.
You know, it doesn't against the weird shit that they're fighting. He always comes off as fairly incompetent.
Yeah.
But there's one episode where they go into the sewer,
Oh, here we go.
and everybody else is useless, and he's a god in the sewer. And so this is what I'm thinking, like that your character was like everybody treats you like a kid, and it's like suddenly you get to switch to a proper language, you know, a language for intelligent people.
Yeah.
And like they're all idiots, and you're the one who comes out looking like $1 million, and it's just you never got that episode.
Yeah, we never really went to a nature kind of thing. It went from like medieval era to modern era to like Shadowrun, and then it kind of died. So we never really went backwards towards like nature and druidism.
Mm-hmm. Well, Shadowrun. Like Sewer Urchin, to continue that as sort of example, like was that character just by having that kind of flaw became memorable enough that I remembered him X years later. You know, just for this podcast.
Yeah.
So anyway, closing statements. What do you got?
Just no two characters are really the same. Enjoy each character for what they are, and try to find that feeling that makes them great. Like, you won't find it in the first episode, maybe not even in the second episode. It might take you time, or you might get it right away. It's not an easy thing to find, but when you find it, it can make a game great. And try to have a few flaws, because Mr. Perfect is not a fun character to play.
Yeah.
You're very bland if you're Mr. Perfect.
It's actually like it's a character without feeling.
Exactly.
Like it really has none. It's just like, oh, I'm perfect. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Oh.
It's like nothing poses a challenge. Nothing.
Well,
I can do anything and everything.
Yeah, or it's like nothing surprises me is the more common trope in D&D, because everything's posing a challenge to you. Like you have to roll dice and there's a chance to fail. But it's like, you know, the Beholder shows up and you're just like, oh yeah.
Well,
whatever. I
that's kind of
swing.
unfortunate.
It's a monster. I see monsters all the time.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. And that's a trope that people will often fall into in D&D, especially with experienced players. I find myself sometimes like that, where it's like, oh my god. We're fighting one of these? Alright, well, let's roll up the old sleeves and start swinging. And it's like, maybe my character should be shitting his pants right now. You know?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Try to keep your character in mind when things come up.
For sure.
Because you know more than your character. You are the god of your character.
The soul of your character.
Yeah, that's better, actually. I like that better. You are the soul of your character. What you may do and what your character may do could be two completely different things.
Yeah.
So keep it in mind.
Mm-hmm. All right. yeah, the feel of your character, I guess if I have to do a closing comment, the feel of your character is... It is an amalgamation of all of the things we talked about in previous episodes, plus a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's like wearing clothes, or wearing shoes is actually a good thing. Brand new pair of shoes, you got to break it in, and when you first wear it, it's not very comfortable, but as that feeling sort of as you wear that feeling in, and then you start elaborating on it, maybe you decorate that shoe with stickers and shit. It starts becoming your own. And you can start really, really running with those shoes on, or with that character, whatever. And part of getting that feeling is developing a character with these quirks, these flaws, these little, almost like side stories about the character that go beyond that list that we talked about before. That list is all about the main primary, like if your character is a single giant arrow, that is the big arrow. But all of these little arrows that are helping that arrow along, like little, I don't know, it's hard to make a visualization of it, but it's one big thing is all of these things that we were talking about, and then a whole bunch of little things that don't really mean anything. Almost like, like secondary motivations. Instead of just primary, secondary, and tertiary, those are other things, instead of just the three alignments axes, like a whole bunch of other ones, in your backstory, you've got your sort of defining backstory, but then you might have other backstories, like little tiny stories. Like it's the little versions of all of these other things, except for maybe gender. Weapon of choice might be, instead of your weapon of choice, it's like your weapon of not quite your choice, but you still like using it. It doesn't make a very good episode, but it's something that's part of your character, and all of that is lumped into the feeling of your character, in addition to the things that were listed. So don't be afraid to expand more on the things that are there. Like, what's your name? Well, do you have a title? Or maybe you have a nickname. So that's a quirk. What's your gender? Yeah, but do you represent that gender? That's a quirk. What's your backstory? Well, do you have any other ones? Little quirks. Weapon of choice. Well, is there something else you like doing, or something else you wish you liked doing? That's a quirk. Primary motivation. Secondary motivation. That's a quirk. Alignment. More axes. Are you positive? Are you negative? Do you on the clock take a poop every day at 9 a.m? These are nonsense things that matter. And and once we get to feeling and flaws, like what kind of flaws? Do you just love teddy bears and gotta boop their nose?
Yep. Maybe you do.
Maybe you do. Every one of these things enriches your character. And when you take them all together and you put on that shoe and you put yourself in that headspace of all of these things and you start keeping them in mind, you can produce a scenario where you are in the game. You literally are there. Like, hi, I'm there. And your suspension of disbelief is gone. Obviously you always know you're playing a game, but you're there. Like, you are that character. You're making those decisions. And if everybody else is dialed in too, like if you can get everybody, the whole play group and your GM to dial that shit right in, you will have the best session ever, and you'll be hooked on roleplay for the rest of your life. You'll never stop. Video games will be as ash. Because they're just not as fun. You'll just wish you were playing D&D, and you wish you were dialed in again.
Yeah.
And it's not even escapism, because sometimes those problems are hard to solve. The escapism is the people who don't work hard on their characters. Those are the people who are just like, I just want to swing and kill unicorns for the rest of my life because I have a really big sword and I do a lot of damage. But yeah, okay. That brings my character to a close. I think all in all, we had some bumpy episodes, but like gender obviously was a bumpy episode, and primary motivation I think was kind of bumpy too.
A little bit, but it wasn't that bad.
But all of them kind of got somewhere that was positive in that it came to some sort of conclusion. I thank everyone for listening to the show with us. Like that was all. It's excellent. We love having an audience, even if it is, like, on average 4 views. Probably 2 to 3 people. Those 2 to 3 people, you guys are the best. And if you want, leave a comment in the comments section if you have anything to say about that. If you want to come on the show at any time, or if you want to, just make a comment and ask about something, ask for us to talk about something. I'm always willing to push back an episode, just to have another episode about it. Like, we may attack gender again one day.
Yeah.
And we've already had like a rules for GMs episode with the Duck Lord that one time, and yeah, we could do all sorts of stuff like that. As you may have noticed in the background, we've got the same Let's Play. That's because I just really haven't had the time to sit down and play video games for a couple hours. But except for freaking Girls Frontline while I'm pooping. But anyway, maybe not for a couple hours, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next episode, or the next series we're going to be running, is called Enter Session, where we discuss the parts of a GM's session/scenario and discover what makes each part the most successful with the least effort.
Oh, going for minimalism on effort.
Well, yeah, nobody wants to spend 10 hours on frickin' planning and GMing.
Fair.
So yeah, and the episodes in that one are going to be NPCs, environment, the trail, barriers, distractions, time, and treasure. And so each of these things we'll discuss them in each episode. The next episode will obviously be NPCs, the GM of a million faces.
Yep.
And yeah, I hope you guys will tune in. Like, subscribe. Freaking, if you ever have a GM struggling, send them our way. Let them watch our show. It's not bad. I think I've had people send those episodes, and they said that it's helped at least a little bit. So whatever. And if you have any suggestions on how we can change the show up, if it's like, tell that Mekhalikhar guy to just shut up and let other people talk, great. You know what? Send it to us. So thank you for watching. I will see you next week. I apologize for not having a very coherent schedule in the last couple weeks, but stuff has been happening, and sometimes people just aren't available to do podcasting.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, whatever. So guys, you take care, and don't die.